You know that feeling when someone you love cuts you so deep that you can literally feel your heart breaking? Yeah, that's exactly where my story begins. I'm Maya, and I'm about to tell you how my own sister's words changed everything between us forever. It was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Well, her life, anyway. My sister Jessica was getting married to this Wall Street hotshot named Bradley at some fancy country club in Connecticut. You know, the type of place where the golf carts cost more than most people's cars, and they serve tiny portions of food with names you can't pronounce for like $300 a plate. Growing up, Jess and I were inseparable. We shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams about our future weddings. We used to practice our vows in our childhood bedroom mirror, giggling about how we'd be each other's maid of honor someday. But somewhere along the way to her saying "I do," things got complicated. See, while Jessica was busy climbing the social ladder with her finance degree and landing Mr. Perfect, I took a different path. I became a paramedic. Yeah, I'm one of those people who runs toward danger when everyone else is running away. It's not glamorous, it doesn't pay much, but it's honest work and I save lives. Or at least, I thought that mattered. The wedding was everything you'd expect from someone trying to impress people she barely knew. Ice sculptures, a string quartet, flowers that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I showed up in my best dress. Okay, my only fancy dress, that I'd saved up for months to buy. It was beautiful, navy blue with these delicate silver details. Nothing too flashy, but I felt good in it. That's when I saw the look. You know the one. That quick up and down glance that says, "You don't fit in here," without words. Jessica's new friends, her future mother-in-law, even some of the other guests were giving me that look, but I brushed it off. This was my sister's day, and I was determined to be happy for her. The ceremony was gorgeous. I'll give her that. Jessica looked like a princess, and Bradley seemed genuinely happy. I cried during their vows. The good kind of tears, you know? For a moment it felt like we were kids again, sharing this magical moment together. But then came the reception. That's where everything went sideways. And trust me, what happened next set off a chain of events that would change our family forever. I'm talking about the kind of revenge that doesn't involve lawyers or police, just pure, calculated justice that hits where it hurts the most. Before I tell you what Jessica said that broke my heart into a million pieces, I need you guys to do me a huge favor. If you're enjoying this story so far, smash that like button. It really helps me out. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Are you Team Maya or Team Jessica so far? Also, make sure you're subscribed because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory, and you're not going to want to miss what happens next. But seriously, what my sister said to me that night, it changed everything. The reception was in full swing, and I was actually having a decent time. I'd found my assigned table, number 12, way in the back near the kitchen doors, of course, and struck up conversations with some of Jessica's college friends. Turns out, not all of them were total snobs. Who knew? I was sipping my second glass of champagne when I decided to go congratulate the happy couple. Jessica was holding court near the head table, surrounded by what looked like a small army of perfectly coiffed women who all seemed to have the same laugh. You know, that fake tinkly sound that rich people make when they're pretending something is funny? "Maya," Jessica called out as I approached, but something in her voice made my stomach twist. "Everyone, this is my sister Maya. She works as a paramedic," the way she said it, like she was announcing I had some contagious disease or something. The women around her exchanged those looks again, the ones that said they were already calculating how quickly they could escape this conversation. "That's so noble," one of them said, and I swear I could hear the quotation marks around that word. It must be so rewarding to help people. Like the folks I save every day aren't the same species as them. But I smiled and nodded, because this was Jessica's day, and I wasn't about to cause a scene. It really is. There's nothing like knowing you've made a difference in someone's worst moment. More polite smiles, more exchanged glances. Then Bradley's mom, let's call her Patricia because of course that's her name, swooped in with her martini and that condescending smile that wealthy women perfect in finishing school. "Maya, darling, Jessica told us you still live in that little apartment in Queens. How quaint. Do you have any plans to better your situation? Better my situation. Like my life was some kind of problem that needed solving. I love my neighborhood, actually, and my job. Not everyone needs to live in Manhattan to be happy, Mrs. Whitfield." The temperature at that little circle dropped about 20 degrees. Patricia's smile got tighter, and Jessica's cheeks flushed pink. That's when I knew I'd said the wrong thing, or maybe the right thing, depending on how you look at it. Well, Patricia continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, I suppose someone has to do those jobs. Jessica, darling, didn't you say Maya was thinking about going back to school? Perhaps for something more suitable? Going back to school? Suitable? I looked at Jessica, waiting for her to defend me, to tell Patricia that I'd never said any such thing, that being a paramedic wasn't some consolation prize I'd settled for. Instead, Jessica just looked uncomfortable and mumbled something about how we all have different paths. That's when Bradley joined our little group, already 3 sheets to the wind and feeling chatty. Hey there, sister-in-law. Having fun? This place is incredible, right? My parents' club has the best of everything. It's beautiful, I said, because it was, even if the people in it were making me feel like garbage. You know, Maya, Bradley continued, swaying slightly, Jessica's told me so much about you, about how different you two are. It's wild, right? Same parents, totally different. What's the word? Ambitions. Jessica shot him a look that could have killed a small animal, but Bradley was on a roll. I mean, look at this place. Look at these people. Jessica fits right in, you know? She gets it. The networking, the connections, the whole scene. It's like she was born for this life. And then came the moment that changed everything. Jessica grabbed Bradley's arm, trying to shut him up, but the damage was being done. I could see it in her eyes. The embarrassment, the wish that I would just disappear. That's when she leaned in close to me, so close I could smell her expensive perfume, and whispered the words that shattered whatever was left of our relationship. Maya, please, you don't belong here. 6 words. That's all it took. The crazy part? She wasn't even being malicious. There was almost pity in her voice, like she felt sorry for me for not understanding that I was out of my league. But here's the thing about people like me. People who run toward burning buildings and hold strangers' hands while they take their last breath. We don't break easily. We bend, sure, but when we snap back, it's with purpose. I stood there for a moment, letting those words sink in. Around me, the party continued. Laughter, clinking glasses, the band playing some jazz standard. But all I could hear was the sound of my heart breaking and something else, something that felt a lot like determination. You're right, I said quietly, loud enough for just Jessica to hear. I don't belong here. And that's when I started planning the most epic, perfectly legal revenge that would teach my sister exactly what it means to belong somewhere. But first, I had to walk away with whatever dignity I had left. I've never been one to make a scene. It's just not who I am. When you work in emergency medicine, you learn to keep your emotions in check, to think clearly even when everything around you is chaos. But standing there, surrounded by people who looked at me like I was some kind of charity case, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Pure, ice-cold clarity. I looked at Jessica, my sister, my former best friend, the person who used to practice dance routines with me in our garage, and I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a hurt smile, but the kind of calm, peaceful smile you get when you finally understand exactly what you need to do. You know what, Jess? You're absolutely right. I don't belong here. I said it loud enough for her little circle to hear, and I watched as relief washed over her face. She actually looked grateful that I was agreeing with her. That hurt more than the original insult, if I'm being honest. But here's where I surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of storming off like some dramatic soap opera character, I calmly walked over to the bar where this sweet older gentleman, let's call him Frank, was mixing drinks. Frank had been nothing but kind to me all evening, asking about my work, genuinely interested in my stories from the ambulance. Frank, I said, pulling out my wallet, you've been absolutely wonderful tonight. The drinks, the service, everything has been perfect. Oh, miss, you don't need to. I pulled out 2 crisp $100 bills. Yeah, that was pretty much my grocery money for the month, but sometimes you gotta make investments in your dignity. This is for you, I said, handing him the money. And please make sure it gets shared with all the servers. You guys have been working so hard to make this night special. Frank's eyes went wide. Miss, this is too generous. Trust me, it's exactly what it needs to be. Word travels fast at fancy parties, especially when money's involved. Within minutes, every server, every busboy, every person working that reception knew that the girl in the navy dress, the one sitting at table 12 in the back, had just tipped them more than most guests tip at events like this. I made my rounds quietly. The coat check girl got a 20. The valet guys got another 20 each. The woman cleaning the restrooms got a 10, and a genuine thank you for keeping everything so nice. By the time I made it back to collect my purse, the entire staff was looking at me like I was some kind of angel. And here's the beautiful part. Jessica and her new in-laws were starting to notice. Patricia cornered me near the exit. "Maya, dear, what's all this I'm hearing about? Tips? Oh, just thanking the hard-working people who made tonight so special. You know, the ones who actually belong here because they earned their place through honest work." Her face went through about 17 different shades of red, but I wasn't done. See, working as a paramedic, you meet all kinds of people. Rich, poor, everything in between. And you know what I've learned? The people with the biggest hearts are usually the ones with the smallest bank accounts. I walked back over to Frank, who was still beaming from our earlier interaction. "Frank, can I ask you something? How long have you been working events like this?" "About 15 years, miss. Started right after my wife got sick. Needed the extra income for her medical bills." "Perfect. And in all that time, how often do guests actually acknowledge you? I mean, really see you, not just as part of the furniture?" Frank's smile faded a little. "Not often, miss. Most folks, they look right through us." I nodded, speaking loud enough for the people around us to hear. "That's what I thought." "Well, Frank, you and your team have made this night absolutely memorable. The real heroes are always the ones working behind the scenes." Then I did something that probably looked crazy to everyone watching. I shook Frank's hand, firmly, looking him right in the eyes. "Thank you for your service tonight. People like you make the world go round." The look on Patricia's face was priceless. The look on Jessica's face when she finally realized what was happening, even better. I walked toward the exit, my head held high, when I heard Jessica call my name. "Maya, wait." I turned around. She was hurrying after me, her perfect dress swishing, her carefully styled hair starting to come loose. "Maya, what you just did in there, what about it? All that money, all those tips, why?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her. In that moment, she looked less like the sophisticated woman who'd just married into Connecticut royalty, and more like the confused little girl who used to ask me to help her with her math homework. Because Jess, those people in there, the ones serving your guests, making sure everything runs smoothly, they do belong here. They earned their place through hard work and dedication. They show up, they do their jobs with pride, and they treat people with respect regardless of how much money is in their bank account. I paused, letting that sink in. And you're right. I don't belong in there. Not because I'm not good enough, but because I have standards. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Behind her, I could see Patricia and Bradley watching our conversation with obvious concern. "Maya, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. And you know what? That's okay. Tonight showed me exactly who you've become. And more importantly, it reminded me exactly who I am." I hugged her then. Not because I forgave her, but because I genuinely felt sorry for her. Sorry that she'd traded her authentic self for acceptance from people who would drop her the second she stopped being useful to them. Congratulations on your marriage, Jessica. I hope it brings you everything you think you want. And with that, I walked out of that country club with my head held high, my dignity intact, and a plan forming in my mind that would teach everyone exactly what it means to truly belong somewhere. But what I didn't know was that my little exit would set off a chain reaction that would expose secrets, destroy relationships, and ultimately bring justice in ways I never could have imagined. The real story was just beginning. The Uber ride back to Queens gave me plenty of time to think. And boy, did I think. I sat in the back of that car, still in my fancy dress, watching the lights of Connecticut fade into the familiar chaos of New York City, and I felt lighter, somehow, like I'd finally dropped a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. My phone started buzzing around midnight. Text after text after text. "Jessica. Maya, can we talk? Jessica. I think there was a misunderstanding. Jessica. Please call me. Jessica. Bradley's mom is asking about you." That last one made me laugh out loud. Patricia was probably having conniptions about the scene I'd caused. Good. But then came the text that really caught my attention. It was from my cousin Derek, who'd also been at the wedding. "Holy shit, Maya. Do you know what you just did? The staff is still talking about you." Frank's practically in tears. "Said in 15 years. Nobody's ever treated him like that. You're a legend." And then, "Also, Bradley's dad cornered me asking questions about you. Weird questions. Something's up." Bradley's dad. Now that was interesting. Richard Whitfield barely acknowledged my existence during the cocktail hour. What could he possibly want to know about me? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, I was getting ready for my shift. Yeah, I had to work the day after my sister's wedding because rent doesn't pay itself. When my phone rang. Unknown Connecticut number. Maya Rodriguez? Speaking. This is Richard Whitfield. We met briefly last night at Bradley and Jessica's reception. I nearly dropped my coffee. Oh, hi, Mr. Whitfield. I was wondering if you might have some time to talk today. In person, if possible. I could drive into the city. Drive into the city? Patricia's husband wanted to drive from Connecticut to Queens to talk to the paramedic who didn't belong at their fancy club. This was either really good or really bad. Can I ask what this is about, sir? It's about last night. About what you did for our staff. And, well, there are some things I think you should know about your sister's new situation. New situation. What the hell did that mean? Mr. Whitfield, with all due respect, I don't really want to get involved in family drama right now. This isn't drama, Maya. This is business. And after what I saw last night, I think you're exactly the kind of person who deserves to know the truth. The truth. Those two words hung in the air like smoke. I'll be home around 6 tonight, I heard myself saying. There's a coffee shop called Rosie's on Northern Boulevard. Do you know Queens at all? He chuckled. I'll find it. Thank you, Maya. After he hung up, I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes. What truth? What business? And why did Richard Whitfield sound almost apologetic? My shift that day was crazy busy. 3 car accidents, 2 overdoses, and 1 woman in labor who couldn't wait for the hospital. Normal Tuesday stuff. But the whole time I kept thinking about that phone call, about the way he'd said, your sister's new situation, like it was something ominous. Around 4 p.m. we got called to this upscale apartment building in Manhattan. Some finance guy having chest pains. Turned out to be a panic attack. Stress from work, he kept saying. His wife was there, perfectly dressed even in the middle of an emergency, apologizing to us for bothering us with something so silly. As we were packing up our equipment, she grabbed my arm. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we wasted your time. Ma'am, you didn't waste anything. This is what we do. And panic attacks aren't silly. They're real medical events that need attention. She looked surprised, like she'd expected me to be annoyed or dismissive. You're very kind. Most people in your position would probably be frustrated with people like us, calling for help over something that isn't serious. People like us, meaning wealthy people. Meaning she assumed I'd be bitter about serving rich folks. Ma'am, when someone calls 911, I don't see their bank account. I see a person who needs help. That's it. The look on her face reminded me of the look on Frank's face the night before, like she couldn't quite believe someone was treating her like a human being instead of a stereotype. As we drove back to the station, my partner Jake shook his head. You know, Rodriguez, most medics would have been pissed about a false alarm in that neighborhood. Rich people calling ambulances for hangnails while we've got real emergencies backing up in the outer boroughs. Maybe, but scared is scared, you know? Doesn't matter if you live in a penthouse or a project. This is why you're never gonna get rich, Maya. You're too nice. Too nice. If only he knew what I was planning. By 6 o'clock, I was sitting in Rosie's, still in my uniform, watching through the window as this sleek black Mercedes pulled up. Richard Whitfield stepped out looking like he'd never set foot in Queens before, but to his credit, he didn't look uncomfortable, just determined. He spotted me immediately and walked over, extending his hand. Maya, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Mr. Whitfield, can I ask why we're not having this conversation at your country club? He sat down across from me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked tired, older than his 60-something years, because what I'm about to tell you can't be overheard by the wrong people. And because after last night I realized that you might be the only person in this whole mess with any integrity. Integrity. From the man whose wife had spent the evening making me feel like dirt. I'm listening. He ordered coffee from Rosie herself, black, no sugar, and waited until we were alone again. Maya, do you know anything about Bradley's business dealings? He works on Wall Street. Something with investments, right? Something like that. Richard's jaw tightened. My son is very good at making money appear and disappear, sometimes into accounts where it doesn't belong. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Are you saying... I'm saying that Bradley has been using his position to move money around in ways that would make the SEC very interested. And I'm saying that your sister, as his wife, is now legally connected to everything he's done. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because last night, When I watched you treat our staff with more dignity and respect than my own family has shown them in 15 years, I realized something. You're the kind of person who does the right thing, even when it costs you. He leaned forward. Maya, your sister is in trouble, real trouble, and she has no idea. The revenge I'd been planning suddenly seemed very small compared to what Richard was telling me. But as I sat there, listening to him explain just how deep Bradley's problems went, I realized something else. Sometimes the universe hands you exactly the tools you need to protect the people you love, even when they don't deserve it. And sometimes, those tools look a lot like justice. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little bit. Richard had spent 2 hours at Rosie's laying out a story that sounded like something from a Netflix crime drama. Bradley wasn't just moving money around. He was running what essentially amounted to a sophisticated Ponzi scheme, using his family's connections and his firm's reputation to bilk investors out of millions. The worst part, Richard had said, stirring his 4th cup of coffee, is that he's been setting up accounts in Jessica's name. If this goes south, when this goes south, she's going to be legally liable for everything. Does she know? I don't think so. Bradley's been very careful to frame it as family financial planning and tax optimization strategies. Your sister thinks she's married into wealth. She has no idea she's married into fraud. Now, lying in my bed at 3 a.m., I kept thinking about Jessica's face at the wedding. The way she'd glowed with happiness. The way she'd looked at Bradley like he was her knight in shining armor. She might have hurt me, but she didn't deserve to have her life destroyed by some white-collar criminal. My phone buzzed. Text from Jessica. Maya, I keep thinking about last night. Can we please talk? I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her figure out her mess on her own. But the bigger part of me, the part that became a paramedic because I can't stand to watch people suffer, couldn't do it. Instead of texting back, I called her. Maya? She sounded surprised and a little hopeful. Hey, you wanted to talk, so let's talk. Thank you for calling. And Maya, about what I said at the reception. Forget about it. That's not why I'm calling. It's not? I took a deep breath. Jess, I need you to answer some questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay? Okay. She sounded confused now. Has Bradley asked you to sign any financial documents lately? Bank account applications, investment forms, anything like that? Long pause. Maya, why are you asking me this? Just answer the question. Please. Yes. He said it was standard stuff for married couples. Joint accounts, investment planning. His financial advisor explained everything. Why? My heart sank. What exactly did you sign, Jess? I don't know, a bunch of papers. Maya, you're scaring me. What's going on? I found myself in an impossible position. I couldn't tell her about my conversation with Richard without his permission. He'd trusted me with information that could destroy his own son. But I also couldn't let my sister walk blindly into legal catastrophe. Jess, I need you to do something for me. Can you get copies of everything you signed? Every document? Every form? Maya, you're really freaking me out here. Good. Maybe you should be freaked out. Just get the papers, okay? And don't sign anything else without having a lawyer look at it first. A lawyer who doesn't work for Bradley or his family. I don't understand. You will. Soon. But right now, I need you to trust me. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and trying to figure out my next move. Richard had made it clear that he wanted to protect Jessica, but he was also trying to protect his family's reputation. That meant whatever evidence he had about Bradley's activities, he wasn't planning to go to the authorities with it, which left me in a really complicated spot. At 6 a.m., I called in sick to work, something I never do, and took the train into Manhattan. I had an idea, but it was risky as hell. Derek had mentioned that Bradley's father was asking questions about me. What if I could use that curiosity to my advantage? I spent the morning at the New York Public Library, researching everything I could find about the Whitfield family business. Turns out, Richard wasn't just Bradley's father. He was also a senior partner at one of those old money investment firms that managed generational wealth for blue blood families. More importantly, he was 2 years away from retirement and had spent the last decade trying to rebuild his firm's reputation after a scandal in the early 2010s. The last thing he needed was his son bringing federal investigators sniffing around. Around noon, I texted him, Mr. Whitfield, I've been thinking about our conversation. Are you free to meet again? I might have an idea. He responded within 5 minutes. Name the place. This time we met at a quiet restaurant in Midtown. Richard looked like he'd slept about as much as I had, which is to say not at all. Maya, I have to ask, have you told Jessica anything about what we discussed? not directly. But I told her to get copies of everything she signed and not to sign anything else without independent legal advice. He nodded approvingly. Smart, though it might be too late for that to matter. What do you mean? Richard pulled out a manila folder. I did some digging after our conversation last night. Bradley's been busier than I thought. He slid the folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, and what looked like SEC filing documents, all with Jessica's name on them. These accounts have been active for 3 months. Your sister isn't just a co-signer, Maya. According to these documents, she's listed as the primary account holder for 7 different investment vehicles that Bradley's been using to move money. I felt sick. How much money are we talking about? $47 million. And that's just what I've been able to trace so far. $47 million. I stared at those numbers until they started to blur. The SEC is already investigating the firm, Richard continued. They haven't connected Bradley to it yet, but it's only a matter of time. When they do, the first thing they'll do is freeze every account connected to him. That includes everything with Jessica's name on it, which means she'll be arrested, which means she'll be charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and about 6 other federal crimes. Even if she beats the charges eventually, the legal fees alone will bankrupt her. And the scandal, he didn't need to finish that sentence. Jessica's new life, her marriage, her dreams of fitting into high society, all of it would disappear overnight. Mr. Whitfield, why are you helping me with this? Bradley's your son. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. Because 30 years ago, I made some questionable decisions to protect this family's interests. Nothing illegal, but morally gray. I told myself it was necessary, that the ends justified the means. He looked up at me. Last night, watching you treat people with basic human decency, something that should be the bare minimum but somehow isn't in my world, I realized I've spent 3 decades surrounded by people who've forgotten what that looks like, including my own son. So what do? Richard smiled grimly. We save your sister, and in the process, we make sure Bradley faces the consequences of his choices. I'm listening. How would you feel about going undercover, Maya? Because I think it's time someone with actual integrity got a close look at Bradley's operation. As he outlined his plan, I realized that my simple idea for revenge had just evolved into something much bigger. Something that could not only protect Jessica, but also bring down a criminal who'd been hiding behind his family's reputation for way too long. Sometimes the universe doesn't just hand you the tools for justice. Sometimes it hands you the blueprint for taking down the whole corrupt system. And I was more than ready to be the one swinging the hammer. You know what's funny about rich people? They never suspect the help is paying attention. Richard's plan was actually brilliant in its simplicity. For the past 5 years, his firm had been hiring consultants to review their risk management procedures, essentially bringing in outside experts to make sure they weren't missing any red flags that could lead to regulatory problems. Bradley thinks these consultants are just part of routine compliance, Richard explained as we walked through Manhattan. He's gotten comfortable ignoring them because he assumes they're looking at boring procedural stuff, not active investigations. And you want me to be one of these consultants? I want you to be exactly who you are. Someone with integrity who notices things others miss. The only difference is that instead of saving lives in an ambulance, you'll be saving your sister's future. I'll admit, the idea terrified me. I'm good at my job, but my job involves medical training and street smarts. This was corporate espionage, even if it was for a good cause. Mr. Whitfield, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't know anything about finance or investments or... Maya, do you know what risk assessment is? Of course. It's fundamental to emergency medicine. You assess a scene, identify potential dangers, prioritize threats, develop response strategies. Exactly. And that's all we're asking you to do here. Assess the scene, identify the dangers, prioritize the threats. The only difference is that instead of medical emergencies, you're looking at financial irregularities. When he put it that way, it almost made sense. What would my cover story be? You're a consultant specializing in operational risk management, with a background in emergency response systems. Your job is to evaluate how our firm handles crisis situations and high-stress decision-making. That's actually not far from the truth. The best cover stories never are. It took 2 days to set everything up. Richard had to clear it with his partners, telling them he wanted to bring in a specialist to review their crisis protocols. Meanwhile, I had to take a week off work, which meant explaining to my supervisor that I had a family emergency, which, technically, I did. Jessica called me 3 times during those 2 days. Each conversation was more frantic than the last. Maya, I tried to get copies of those documents like you said, but Bradley's assistant told me they're stored at his office for security reasons. When I asked Bradley about it, he got weird and defensive. Weird how? He kept saying I was being paranoid, that I was letting my family's blue-collar suspicions get to me. Then he said maybe I should focus on being a supportive wife instead of playing detective. Blue-collar suspicions. I wanted to reach through the phone and shake him. Jess, that's a red flag the size of Texas. I know, but Maya, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid because I'm not used to this world? What if I'm sabotaging my own marriage because I don't understand how wealthy families handle their finances? That broke my heart. Jessica was starting to doubt her own instincts because Bradley was using her insecurities against her. Listen to me very carefully, I said. You are not paranoid. You are not sabotaging anything. And you have every right to understand what you've signed your name to. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. On Wednesday morning, I put on the most professional outfit I could afford, a black pantsuit I'd bought for job interviews a few years ago, and walked into the marble lobby of Whitfield and Associates like I belonged there. The receptionist, a young woman named Claire, greeted me with a smile that seemed genuine. You must be Ms. Rodriguez. Mr. Whitfield told us to expect you. I'll show you to your temporary office. My temporary office turned out to be a small conference room with a view of Central Park and enough space for me to spread out documents and look official. Richard had already arranged for me to have access to sample case files to review, which of course were carefully selected examples of Bradley's questionable transactions. Maya, Richard said, stepping into the room after Claire left, I want you to remember something. You're not here to prove Bradley is guilty. You're here to document what you observe. Let the evidence speak for itself. And if I find evidence of criminal activity, then we make sure it gets to the right people in a way that protects Jessica. My first day was mostly about getting my bearings and establishing my cover. I met with various partners and associates, asking questions about their risk management protocols, taking notes, nodding thoughtfully at explanations of their client onboarding processes. But I was also listening and watching. Bradley's office was 3 doors down from my conference room, and the walls in these old buildings aren't as thick as you'd think. By lunchtime, I'd already overheard 2 phone conversations that made my skin crawl. Look, the money's there. It's just in a different account structure than we discussed. No, she doesn't need to know the details. Trust me, this is standard wealth management. And then later, the consultant? She's nobody, just some risk assessment person my dad hired to make the regulators happy. Yeah, I know. More bureaucratic bullshit. Nobody. After everything I'd done to help people, after years of saving lives and making a difference, Bradley Whitfield saw me as nobody. Just bureaucratic bullshit. That afternoon, I got my first real look at the documents Richard had mentioned. Under the guise of reviewing case studies in client communication, I was given access to email chains and account records that painted a picture of systematic fraud that was way worse than I'd imagined. Bradley wasn't just moving money around illegally. He was specifically targeting elderly clients with early-stage dementia, convincing their families that complex investment structures were necessary to protect their legacies. Then he'd use those accounts as personal piggy banks, knowing that by the time anyone noticed, the clients would be too sick to testify. I sat in that conference room, reading email after email of Bradley discussing these vulnerable people like they were ATM machines, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not anger. I've been angry plenty of times. This was pure, cold fury. Around 4 p.m., Jessica texted me, Bradley wants to take me to dinner tonight to apologize for being defensive. Should I go? I stared at that text for a long time. On one hand, I needed Jessica to stay close to Bradley so we could monitor what he was doing. On the other hand, every instinct I had was screaming at me to tell her to run. I texted back, go, but be careful. And Jess, if he asks you to sign anything, tell him you want to sleep on it first, no matter what. Why? What's going on, Maya? Just trust me, please. At 5:30, as the office was emptying out, Richard stopped by my conference room. How was day 1? Educational. Richard, this is so much worse than you told me. His face darkened. What did you find? I showed him the email chains I'd been reviewing, watched his face go pale as he read his son discussing elderly clients like they were livestock. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Maya, I had no idea it was this bad. How is that possible? You're his father and his boss, because I trusted him. Because when your own son looks you in the eye and tells you he's following all the rules, you want to believe him. Richard sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. During her treatment, Bradley was the one who handled all our medical expenses, coordinated with insurance, managed the financial side of everything. He was so supportive, so responsible. I thought he'd grown up, become a man of integrity. I understood then. Richard wasn't just trying to protect Jessica or save his firm's reputation. He was trying to reconcile the son he thought he knew with the criminal he was discovering. What do we do now? Now we make sure we have enough evidence to put him away for a very long time, and we make sure Jessica doesn't go down with him. That evening, I went home to Queens feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world. I'd spent 1 day in Bradley's world and already uncovered evidence of crimes that would destroy dozens of lives. How many more victims were there? How many families had been ruined while people like Patricia worried about whether the help knew their place? Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. Jessica. Maya, I need to tell you something. What happened? At dinner tonight, Bradley. He was different. Charming, but also kind of desperate. He kept talking about how much he loved me, how he wanted to take care of me forever, how I never had to worry about money again. Okay. And then he asked me to sign something. Said it was just updating our joint accounts now that we're married. But Maya, the way he asked, it felt wrong. Did you sign it? No. I remembered what you said about sleeping on it, but Bradley got really upset. Not angry exactly, but scared, like he needed me to sign it tonight. My blood went cold. Jess, where are you now? Home. Bradley said he had to go back to the office for a few hours. Some kind of emergency. At 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, right after his wife refused to sign documents that would probably make her legally responsible for even more of his crimes. Jessica, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Pack a bag, just essentials, and go stay with someone Bradley doesn't know well, tonight. Maya, you're scaring me again. Good. Be scared. Be very scared. And whatever you do, don't sign anything else. Not even a credit card receipt if you can avoid it. What is going on? I took a deep breath. It was time to tell her at least part of the truth. Jess, I think Bradley is in serious legal trouble, the kind that could destroy both of your lives. And I think he's trying to make you responsible for whatever he's done. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted forever. Finally, Maya, are you sure about this? I'm sure enough that I think your life might be in danger if you don't get away from him until we figure this out. My life? Maya, that's crazy. Bradley would never hurt me. Maybe not physically, but financially? Legally? Jess, he's already hurt you in ways you don't even understand yet. Oh. After she hung up, promising to think about what I'd said but not promising to actually leave, I sat in my kitchen and realized that my simple plan for revenge had evolved into something much more complicated. I wasn't just trying to teach my sister a lesson anymore. I was trying to save her life. And tomorrow, I had to go back into that office and pretend to be nobody while gathering evidence that could bring down a man who saw people like me as disposable. But here's the thing about people like me. People who run toward danger instead of away from it. We don't stay nobody for very long. Bradley Whitfield was about to learn that the hard way. Thursday morning brought the kind of phone call that makes your blood turn to ice water. Maya? Jessica's voice was shaky, scared. I think I made a mistake. I was getting dressed for my second day undercover, but I sat down hard on my bed. What happened? I stayed home last night like you said, but this morning Bradley came back with flowers and apologies and... Maya, he was so sweet, so convincing. He said he'd been stressed about work and took it out on me, and that he just wanted to make sure I was financially protected if anything happened to him. No. Jess, please tell me you didn't. I signed the papers this morning. But Maya, I read them first. They just looked like insurance forms and investment account updates. Nothing suspicious. I closed my eyes. Did you keep copies? Bradley said he'd get me copies after they were processed. Maya, you're making me feel like I did something wrong. But I'm married to this man. I have to trust him sometime, right? Wrong. So, very catastrophically wrong. Where are you now? Getting ready for work. Why? Don't go to work today. Call in sick. Maya, I can't just... Jessica, listen to me. Whatever you signed this morning, it wasn't insurance forms. I need you to go somewhere public, somewhere with lots of people, and stay there until I can figure out what's happening. You're being paranoid. I'm being careful. There's a difference. After I hung up, I called Richard immediately. We have a problem. Jessica signed more documents this morning. The string of profanity that came through the phone was impressive, even for someone who'd heard every curse word imaginable during my years as a paramedic. Richard, we need to accelerate whatever we're doing. I think Bradley's getting ready to run, and he's making sure Jessica takes the fall for everything. Can you get to the office early today, before Bradley arrives? I'm leaving now. The Whitfield and Associates building was mostly empty at 7 a.m., just security and cleaning staff. Richard met me in the lobby, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Maya, I've been thinking about this all night. We can't just gather evidence anymore. We need to actively prevent Jessica from being framed. What do you mean? I mean, we need to get copies of whatever she signed this morning before Bradley has a chance to file them with the appropriate agencies. And we need to document exactly what's in those accounts she's now legally responsible for. We took the elevator up to the executive floor, Richard using his keycard to access Bradley's office. Is this legal? Probably not, but neither is what my son is doing to your sister. Bradley's office was exactly what you'd expect from a pretentious Wall Street type. Massive mahogany desk, leather-bound books he'd probably never read, expensive art that screamed, "I have money and want everyone to know it." But Richard went straight to the filing cabinet. Bradley's old school about some things. He keeps physical copies of everything, filed by date. He pulled out a folder marked with today's date. Here. Inside were photocopies of the documents Jessica had signed that morning. As I read through them, my hands started shaking. Richard, these aren't insurance forms. These are power of attorney documents and trust fund transfers. And, oh my God. What? According to these papers, Jessica just became the sole legal owner of 7 offshore accounts containing $47 million in assets that the SEC is about to freeze. Richard's face went white, which means when they arrest her, she'll be charged with being the mastermind instead of the victim. We spent the next hour photographing every document in Bradley's files, building a timeline of exactly how he'd manipulated Jessica into becoming his fall guy. It was diabolic in its simplicity. Every document she'd signed over the past 3 months had been carefully crafted to shift legal responsibility from Bradley to her, while making it look like she was the one orchestrating the fraud. At 8:30, we heard the elevator ding. "Shit," Richard whispered. "That's probably Bradley. Maya, you need to get back to your conference room. Now." I grabbed my phone and the camera and slipped out of Bradley's office just as I heard his voice in the hallway. By the time he rounded the corner, I was sitting in my temporary office, spread out with official-looking documents, playing the part of the consultant nobody. "Morning," Bradley said, sticking his head into my conference room. Up close, he looked terrible. Bags under his eyes, nervous energy, the kind of manic cheerfulness that comes from desperation. "Good morning, Mr. Whitfield. I hope you don't mind me starting early. I'm really fascinated by your firm's approach to crisis management." "Crisis management?" His smile faltered for just a second. "Yes. How you handle high-stress situations, unexpected complications, regulatory challenges. I imagine in your line of work, you must deal with a lot of unpredictable variables." "Right. Yes. Well, we're very good at adapting to changing circumstances." "Adapting? Like framing your wife for federal crimes?" "I'd love to hear more about your personal approach to handling difficult situations. Maybe we could chat later today?" "Actually, I'm going to be pretty busy today. Family stuff, you know how it is. Family stuff. Like making sure Jessica was properly set up to take the fall for everything." After he left, I immediately texted Jessica. "Where are you right now?" "At the coffee shop near my office." "Why?" "Stay there. Order food. Make yourself comfortable. I'm coming to get you." "Maya, I can't just sit in a coffee shop all day." "Yes, you can, and you will. Because your husband just became the most dangerous person in your life." I told Richard I was taking a long lunch and caught the subway to Jessica's office in Midtown. I found her at a corner table, looking confused and frustrated, and still beautiful, in that put-together way she'd perfected since marrying Bradley. "Maya, what is going on? You're acting like I'm in witness protection or something." I sat down across from her and pulled out my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken of the documents she'd signed. "Jess, what you signed this morning wasn't insurance paperwork. It was a confession." I watched her face change as I explained what each document meant, how Bradley had systematically transferred legal responsibility for his crimes to her, how she was now, on paper, the mastermind behind a $47 million fraud scheme. That's impossible. Bradley loves me. He wouldn't what? Wouldn't use the woman he married to save himself from federal prison? She stared at the photos for a long time, and I could see the exact moment when it all clicked into place, when she realized that the man she'd married, the life she'd built, the future she'd dreamed of, all of it was a lie. Maya, what do I do? First, you're going to call a criminal defense attorney, not a family lawyer, not someone who handles divorces, someone who specializes in federal white-collar crime. I can't afford. Richard is going to pay for it. He feels responsible for what his son has done. Richard knows about this? Richard is the one who figured it out. Jess, Bradley's own father, is helping us build a case against him. She started crying then. Not the pretty, delicate tears of a woman who's learned to cry attractively, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose entire world has just collapsed. I'm so stupid. I'm so fucking stupid. You're not stupid. You're trusting. There's a difference. Is there? Because right now it feels like the same thing. I reached across the table and took her hand. Jess, do you remember when we were kids and you had that nightmare about being trapped in quicksand? She nodded, wiping her nose with a coffee shop napkin. And I told you that the secret to escaping quicksand isn't to panic and fight it. It's to stay calm, move slowly, and trust that someone will throw you a rope. Yeah, this is your quicksand moment, and I'm your rope. For the first time since I'd sat down, she smiled. It was shaky and tear-stained, but it was real. Maya, I said some terrible things to you at the wedding. Forget about it. That's not what matters now. It matters to me. You were the only person who treated the staff like human beings that night, the only person who acted with any dignity. And I was ashamed of you for it. She squeezed my hand. I was ashamed of the wrong person. As I sat there with my sister, planning how to take down the man who'd tried to destroy her life, I realized something. My original plan for revenge, teaching Jessica a lesson about belonging, had evolved into something much more important. I wasn't trying to get back at her anymore. I was trying to save her. And Bradley Whitfield was about to learn that when you mess with a paramedic's family, you don't just get revenge, you get justice. 3 weeks later, I was back at Rosie's coffee shop in Queens, but this time I wasn't alone. Jessica sat across from me, looking more like her old self than she had in months. No perfect makeup, no designer clothes, just my sister in jeans and a sweatshirt, drinking coffee and finally able to breathe again. So the FBI arrested him at the country club? She asked, still slightly amazed by how everything had gone down. Yep, right in the middle of his golf game with Patricia's bridge club watching. Richard said it was the most satisfying moment of his entire life. The takedown had been swift and brutal. Armed with the evidence Richard and I had gathered, plus testimony from dozens of elderly victims whose families had finally come forward, the FBI had built an airtight case against Bradley Whitfield. Not only was he charged with fraud, money laundering, and elder abuse, but his careful attempt to frame Jessica had backfired spectacularly. The prosecutor said that trying to pin everything on you actually made it worse for him, I continued. It showed premeditation and a pattern of manipulation that added years to his potential sentence. Jessica shook her head. 25 years. I still can't believe it. Believe it. And Jess? He's not getting out early for good behavior. White-collar criminals who target elderly victims don't tend to be popular in federal prison. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the familiar chaos of Northern Boulevard through the window. It felt good to be back in my neighborhood, surrounded by real people living real lives, after weeks of dealing with Manhattan lawyers and federal investigators. Maya, can I ask you something? Shoot, that night at the wedding, when you tipped all the staff and walked out, did you already know something was wrong? Is that why you did it? I thought about that question. Honestly? No. I had no idea about Bradley's crimes. I just knew that the people working that night were being treated like they were invisible, and that felt wrong to me. So why did you tip them so much? Because they were the only people there who earned their place through honest work. They belonged there more than anyone else. Jessica smiled. You know what's funny? After everything that happened, Frank the bartender sent me a letter. He said that watching you that night reminded him why he takes pride in his job, even when customers treat him badly. Frank sent you a letter? He sent letters to both of us. Yours is at my place. Well, my new place. The studio apartment I can actually afford. Jessica had lost everything in the divorce, of course. The penthouse, the fancy cars, the country club membership. All of it had been purchased with stolen money. But she'd also gained something more valuable, her integrity back. I don't miss it, she said, reading my thoughts. The fancy stuff. It never felt real anyway. What feels real? This. Sitting here with my sister, drinking coffee that costs $3 instead of $30, Having a job where I actually help people instead of just looking pretty at charity events. Jessica had started working at a nonprofit that helped families navigate healthcare costs, using her finance background for something that actually mattered. The pay was terrible, but she loved it. Maya, I need to tell you something else. What's that? I'm proud of you. Not just for saving me from Bradley, but for who you are. You were right that night. I didn't belong at that country club, but not because I wasn't good enough for them, because they weren't good enough for me. And now I belong wherever I am, because I'm not pretending to be someone else anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Maya, I wanted you to know. The SEC recovered $43 million from the offshore accounts. The victims' families are getting their money back. Thank you for everything you did. I showed Jessica the message. You know what the best part is? She said. Mrs. Henderson from Bradley's victim list. Her granddaughter called me yesterday. She's using her inheritance to go to nursing school. Said she wants to help people the way you helped her grandmother. How did I help her grandmother? By making sure she got justice. By proving that someone cared enough to fight for her even though she's 90 years old and has dementia. We finished our coffee as the sun started to set over Queens. In a few hours I'd be back on shift, responding to emergencies, helping people through the worst moments of their lives. Jessica would go home to her studio apartment and prep for tomorrow's appointments with families who couldn't afford their medical bills. We weren't rich. We weren't fancy. We didn't belong at country clubs or charity galas, but we belonged to something better, a world where people take care of each other, where hard work means something, where justice isn't just for people who can afford it. As we walked to the subway station, Jessica grabbed my arm. Maya, do you think we'll ever see each other at another fancy event? Probably not. Good. Next time we celebrate something, let's do it here, at Rosie's, with people who actually matter. Deal. And Maya, thank you for saving my life, for never giving up on me, for showing me what it really means to belong somewhere. I hugged my sister goodbye and watched her disappear into the subway crowd, just another person heading home after a long day of honest work. 6 months ago, she told me I didn't belong at her wedding. She was right, but not for the reasons she thought. I didn't belong there because I had standards, because I knew the difference between being important and being valuable. And in the end, that made all the difference. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting back at someone for hurting you. Sometimes it's about proving that their definition of success was wrong all along. That belonging somewhere isn't about having enough money to buy your way in. It's about having enough integrity to earn your place. Bradley Whitfield thought he belonged in a world where other people existed to serve his needs. Now he belongs in a federal prison cell. And honestly, that's exactly where someone like him should be. As for me, I belong exactly where I've always belonged. Helping people, fighting for justice, and never apologizing for treating everyone with basic human dignity. And if that makes me nobody in some people's eyes, I'm perfectly fine with that. After all, some of the most important people in the world are nobodies. They're the paramedics and teachers and social workers and bartenders who keep the world running while rich people play games with other people's lives. They're the people who show up, do their jobs with pride, and treat everyone with respect, regardless of how much money is in their bank account. They're the people who actually belong. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this wild ride of family drama and justice. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps me know what kind of content you want to see more of. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And tell me what you thought about Maya's approach to handling her sister's betrayal. Was she right to go undercover? Or should she have handled it differently? And make sure you're subscribed because I've got more incredible true stories coming your way. Stories about family secrets, workplace revenge, and people who refuse to let others walk all over them. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is just being a better person than the people who tried to tear you down.